Yo, what's going on everybody? Today's video is going to be on a Jade Harvester build for Torment 13. So the concept of the Jade Harvester set is really pretty basic, but it is one of the harder to master in the game. Basically, you apply your Haunt and your Locust Swarm damage over time effects, and then you blow them up with your Soul Harvest, dealing massive damage. First things first, let's go over what the Jade Harvester set does. The 2 set reads, when Haunt lands on an enemy already affected by Haunt, it instantly deals 120 seconds worth of Haunt damage. You're going to mostly see this come into play on Rift Guardians for Torment 13. Every once in a while, you'll finish off an Elite or Champion with the 2 set, but it's mostly for Rift Guardians for Torment difficulty. The 4 set, Soul Harvest gains the effect of every rune and has its cooldown reduced by 1 second every time you cast Haunt or Locust Swarm. And then the 6 set, Soul Harvest consumes your damage over time effects on enemies, instantly dealing 300 seconds worth of remaining damage. So for the abilities, first up we have Haunt Resentful Spirits. This is going to cast 2 Haunts at once, and with the Haunting Girdle Belt we'll actually be casting 3 Haunts at once. And really what you want to be doing is only casting Haunt twice on every Elite and Champion pack, and then you're able to Soul Harvest right after just 2 casts, and that'll really keep your runs efficient. Other options here would be to run Poisoned Spirit for more damage or Lingering Spirit, but in my testing I think Resentful Spirits is the best bet. We have Locust Swarm Pestilence. Locust Swarm has a 100% chance to jump to 2 additional nearby enemies. We're going to run Wormwood in the cube to cast this automatically for us. Now, if you're running the Vile Hive Mojo, you're going to get this rune automatically, so you can then run any other Locust Swarm rune on your bar, or just none at all. You can just completely replace it with something else. But other options would be to run potentially Devouring Swarm because it's a cold rune, and you're going to stack cold damage on your bracers and your amulet if possible to boost the damage of your Haunt. That cold damage will then boost the damage of your Locust Swarm as well. It's not all that relevant, but it is more damage. Other options would be to run Cloud of Insects for damage reduction. In my testing, in my favorite setup, I don't run the Vile Hive, so we're going to run Pestilence here. We're going to run Thing of the Deep on our character, which we'll go over the items here soon and talk about all the variations and all that good stuff. But currently we're running Pestilence there. Piranha's Paranado. This is going to pull mobs together and then also increase damage that they take by 15%. Now Piranhas is not necessary or mandatory for Torment farming, but I do like it for grouping mobs. If you decide not to run it, you could run any of the Summon Zombie Dogs runes and then run the Fierce Loyalty passive for more movement speed. Next up, Spirit Walk Severance. This is going to be an Engeom build, so Severance is going to be the majority of our movement speed. You're going to get 100% increased movement speed on top of the extra movement speed you already get from just the vanilla Spirit Walk. And with the Engeom procced, you can pretty much just spam this for insane movement. Next up, Soul Harvest. With the 4-piece Jade, we're going to get every rune of Soul Harvest. So Swallow Your Soul gives you mana back, Siphon gives you life back, Languish is going to increase your armor and then also reduce the movement speed of enemies, Soul to Waste gives you movement speed, and then Vengeful Spirit does a little bit of damage. Horrify's Stalker. 20% increased movement speed for 4 seconds after casting Horrify. It also gives you some CC on enemies. And then we're going to run the Rochelle's Ring of Larceny, which gives you even more movement speed, another burst of speed whenever you fear an enemy. Next, the passives. Confidence Ritual. You deal 25% additional damage to enemies within 20 yards. Soul Harvest is basically a melee ability, so every time you Soul Harvest, you're going to get this damage increase. Grave Injustice. Gain 1% of your maximum life and mana and reduce the cooldown of all of your skills by 1 second when an enemy dies within 20 yards. And this effect is increased by your gold pickup radius. Now, with the Engeom, this might seem like overkill a little bit, but even with the Engeom buff up, this is still great. And sometimes you'll have Elite and Champion droughts, and when you do, Grave Injustice really picks up the slack for your cooldowns. Creeping Death is the most important passive for Jade Harvester. Your Haunt, Locust Swarm, and the damage amplification from Piranhas last almost forever. Almost forever is actually 3,600 seconds or 1 hour. Now let's quickly talk about what the Quetzalcoatl Voodoo Mask does in relation to the Creeping Death passive and the Jade Harvester set. The Quetzalcoatl Voodoo Mask compresses its duration by half, so 1 hour becomes a half hour. The Quetzalcoatl also does the same total damage of the DOTs, but in half the duration, effectively leading to double damage per tick. So the 6-piece Jade Harvester consumes 300 seconds of your dot damage. So after about 5 soul harvests, you need to reapply your dots. Now on Torment difficulty, this really isn't that big of a deal because most things are going to be dead before you ever have to worry about reapplying your dots. You won't have consumed all of the damage over times. This really only comes into play for the most part when you're pushing greater rifts with Jade Harvester. Next up, Spirit Vessel. Now, I'm running gold wrap in the cube, so that's going to take care of pretty much all of our toughness, but you have to pick up gold at the beginning of the rift to get it going. And there will be times where you haven't picked up gold recently, and you're very vulnerable in those spots. So I like Spirit Vessel just to make sure that we're not dying and really killing our efficiency. But you don't need to run it. You could easily run Pierce the Veil in this slot or any other defensive passives if you wanted to. And then as for the 5th passive with the Hellfire Amulet, we are running Gruesome Feast. So whenever you pick up a health globe, you gain 10% of your maximum mana and 10% intelligence for 15 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. You should have anywhere from 3 to 5 stacks of Gruesome Feast at any given time, especially if you're just elite and champion hunting. You'll see tons of health globes dropping. Next up, we have the equipment. Now keep in mind that Locust Swarm and Haunt do not crit, but they do gain damage from crit chance and crit damage. So they're both very important stats. For the weapon slot, we have the Engiom with Int, Vitality, and a socket and weapon damage. You could also go with CDR over the Vitality. Now, you really want a 10-second one for your Spirit Walk, but 9 seconds is fine. You're still able to just spam Soul Harvest with a 9-second Engiom, and that's the most important thing. You can just spam Soul Harvest and really amp up your damage. Thing of the Deep for the offhand gives you 20 pickup radius. Stats-wise, you want Int, Crit Chance, Haunt damage, and then either Vitality or CDR over the mana regen there. For rings, we have the Rochelle's Ring of Larceny, which gives you a burst of speed after you fear an enemy. Again, we're fearing with Horrify. Intelligence, Crit Damage, Crit Chance, and a socket. We got the Ring of Royal Grandeur here. So we're running the Ring of Royal Grandeur and then 5 pieces of Jade with my current setup. And ideally, you would have crit damage over the attack speed. For the belt slot, we have the Haunting Girdle, Int, Vitality, All Res, and Armor. Haunt releases 1 extra spirit. This is how we're casting 3 haunts at once. We've got the Nemesis Bracers. Shrines and Pylons will spawn an enemy champion. So this is really important for the Engiom to make sure that you're spawning enough elites and champions to keep that buff going. You want cold damage, intelligence, vitality, and crit chance. For the amulet slot, we have the Hellfire Amulet with Int, crit damage, crit chance, and a socket. And again, the Gruesome Feast passive. The Quetzalcoatl Voodoo Mask, which we already discussed what that does, with intelligence, vitality, crit chance, and a socket with a CDR gem. And then for the Jade pieces, on the Jade Harvester's shoulders, you want intelligence, vitality, cooldown reduction, and then ideally you'd have haunt damage over armor. For the gloves, intelligence, crit damage, crit chance, and CDR. For the chest, intelligence, vitality, haunt damage. The pants, intelligence, vitality, armor, and 2 sockets. And then for the boots, intelligence, vitality, armor, and movement speed. And movement speed could also be a defensive stat. As for the Kanai's Cube, in the weapon slot we have the Wormwood. Locust Swarm continuously plagues enemies around you. So again, this is just going to cast Locust Swarm for us, and that allows us to just spam Haunt and then focus on soul harvesting. In the armor slot, we've got the Gold Wrap. On gold pickup, you gain armor for 5 seconds equal to the amount picked up. And again, this is basically where all of our toughness is coming from. Just be careful at the very beginning of the rifts when you haven't picked up any gold yet to not die. And then we got the Ring of Emptiness. You deal 300% increased damage to enemies affected by both your Haunt and your Locust Swarm. Next up, the Legendary Gems. So, Bane of the Trapped, get increased damage to anything under the effects of control impairing effects. And then the secondary effect, you gain an aura that reduces the movement speed of enemies within 15 yards by 30%. So this will proc itself, but also everything that you haunt is going to be slowed, proccing Bane of the Trapped. We've got Bane of the Powerful, gain 20% increased damage for a certain amount of seconds after killing an elite pack, and then gain 15% increased damage versus elites and take 15% reduced damage from elites. And then Boon of the Hoarder, chance on killing an enemy to cause an explosion of gold, and you gain 30% increased movement speed for 2 seconds after picking up gold. So this goes very well with the Gold Wrap, has great synergy there. Alternative options If you're not running the gold wrap, you can run an esoteric alteration as a gem to stay alive. And then also Gogok of Swiftness gives you attack speed, so you can spam your haunts quicker, and then gives cooldown reduction as well. Now let's talk about alternative gearing options. So one of the best alternatives is to just run full Jade Harvester on your character and drop the Ring of Royal Grandeur, and then you swap out Gold Wrap in the cube for the Quetzalcoatl. That's great, but you definitely have to gear for that to stay alive if you're not running the Gold Wrap. And I think with the Engiom, the best bet is to run Gold Wrap, because you're not able to run Sacred Harvester because you need the weapon slot for Wormwood and then Engiom on your character. So Sacred Harvester's out for that setup. Also, if you're running Nemesis Bracers, you don't have the Lacumbra's Bracers here to give you even more damage reduction. But you can definitely go that route. You can also run the Vile Hive on your character for more Locust Form damage, and you get the Pestilence Rune, so then you can then swap out Pestilence on your bar for a defensive Locust Swarm, or just drop it completely in favor of something else. So for the ring slots, if you decide to drop the Ring of Royal Grandeur and run full 6-piece Jade, you could run an Avarice Band. You can even run an Avarice Band potentially over Rochelle's Ring of Larceny and have crazy pickup radius with the Thing of the Deep. But you'd probably drop the Ring of Royal Grandeur for the Avarice Band for pickup radius, and then run the Vile Hive on your character, for instance. You could also go with the Convention of Elements for more damage. Potentially you could drop Engiom completely and just run Sacred Harvester on your character. It's maybe going to be a little bit more consistent on rifts that don't have a lot of elites and champions, but overall I think your clear times are going to be much higher with the Engiom. But this allows Soul Harvest to stack up to 10 times, and you're going to get 25% more movement speed on top of the 25% you already have from Soul to Waste with this stacking up to 10 times, as well as a ton more armor from Languish. And if you decide to pair it with the Lacumbra's Ornament, you get huge damage reduction. Potentially you can always run Lacumbra's Ornament, and if you want to, you can just pop open your inventory and swap to Nim Bracers whenever you get to a shrine, and then pop your Lacumbra's Ornament back on. Personally, I'm too lazy for that. I'd rather just wear the Nims all the time. I like to be a little bit more lazy when I'm running Torment difficulty, but that is an option if it's something that you want to do. There probably are quite a few other options too. You know, you can run a Witching Hour on your character, you could run a Harrington Waistguard, things like that, even a Crim's Buff Belt for more movement speed. You know, you can even run a Henry's Perquisition as a Mojo on your character. There are a ton of options. You know, potentially you could drop the Hellfire Amulet and just run Traveler's Pledge Compass Rose. So play around with it, decide what you guys like for yourselves. Personally though, I think the current setup that I'm running is by far my favorite. I think if you're running Engiom, you really need that Gold Wrap to stay alive, because again, you're dropping this combo right here. And this combination is what really keeps Jade Harvester alive. And honestly, you know, this combo you see in just about every pushing build for Witch Doctor anymore, because it's so powerful. As for the Paragon points, get as much movement speed as you need, and then go Intelligence for core. For offense, crit chance and crit damage first, then cooldown reduction, and then attack speed. For pushing Jade builds, I would normally say go CDR first, but since you're running the Engiom, go for the damage first. Defensive wise, armor percentage, life percentage, all resist, life regen, and then utility, gold find, area damage, life per hit, and then resource cost reduction. So that'll about wrap it up, guys. This build probably isn't the most efficient for Torment 13 farming. More than likely the Angry Chicken, Helltooth, Gargantuan build is going to be a little bit quicker, but this is efficient enough if you enjoy the build, and I think it's a lot more fun to play overall. I love me some Angry Chicken, but I really love Jade too, and Engiom builds in general with Severance are a lot of fun when you get that much movement speed going on. So anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.